I realize that the conception of these giant creatures, they're called Bigfoot, is a fantastic subject, and a lot of people scoff at it and don't believe it, but I believe it. I'm convinced that these creatures exist.
When researchers finally ran the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot footage through advanced artificial intelligence, they anticipated one result: confirmation it was staged. The system analyzed every frame, traced each movement, and calculated every proportion. It didn't uncover a hoax. It identified a subject it couldn't categorize, and what emerged from that analysis was far more disturbing than any theory about a costume. The AI's conclusion. The AI's first move was motion analysis. Frame by frame, its algorithms broke down every component of movement in the footage: center of mass, limb swing, joint rotation, stride cadence. In any costume, even a highly advanced one, stiffness eventually appears. Fabric strains at the joints, weight shifts look unnatural. The wearer compensates for what they're carrying. The AI found none of that. Instead, it detected smooth, weighted motion, a body responding to gravity like a massive biological organism. Each step carried momentum consistent with a subject far heavier than any human in padding could realistically imitate. The gait showed no hesitation, no overcorrection, no compensation patterns typical of performers in heavy suits. The figure moved as if the body it inhabited truly belonged to it, because by every metric the AI measured, it did.
Bob Heironimus, who says he was Bigfoot, when you see him walk, he's this big old gangly cowboy looking dude. When you see him walk, he walks exactly like that Bigfoot.
You
thing
think it was
did.
him?
100%.
Then the analysis shifted to proportions. AI-based mapping systems measured the creature's limb ratios across dozens of frames. The arms appeared strikingly long, nearly equaling the length of the legs, a ratio far beyond the range of any human body, even one modified with prosthetic extensions. Padding can increase mass, but it cannot alter skeletal structure during movement. The limb proportions stayed consistent in every frame, with no warping or fluctuation that would suggest artificial enhancement. When researchers compared those ratios against hundreds of documented primate species, the closest alignment was not human. It resembled great apes more closely, yet didn't fully match any known species. The body configuration landed in a biological gap, a category where, according to current records, nothing should exist.
The footprint evidence, the casts that were recovered from this site, I would be very convinced of the credibility of the film. The Sasquatch has retained the more primitive characteristic of a very flexible instep, a midfoot flexibility, which can be seen here.
The third layer of analysis targeted the fur. Researchers had long heard claims that the suit was made from Dynel, a synthetic nylon fiber used in marine construction. AI texture modeling tested that claim directly. Dynel interacts with sunlight in a specific way. It produces visible glare patterns, a reflective sheen that synthetic fibers cannot hide under direct light. The AI scanned every sun-exposed frame of the footage. No glare was detected. The hair covering the subject absorbs light and responds to movement exactly the way natural fur does, shifting direction, catching shadow, lying flat against muscle contraction. Synthetic nylon does not behave this way. More critically, the fur moves independently of the body beneath it. In a costume, the exterior fabric is tethered to the surface. It stretches, bunches, and drags as a single layer. In this footage, the fur shifts over the muscle structure beneath it, responding to the contractions underneath the way animal hair responds to the living tissue it grows from.
The heel moves somewhat independently of the rest of the foot. This allows for a combination of propulsion and prehension, or the grasping ability of the foot. That indicates the ability to navigate that very rugged, steep terrain that you can see surrounding this film subject.
The fourth conclusion was something no hoax explanation has ever fully answered. In the footage, you can clearly see what's called a mid-tarsal break, a flex point in the middle of the foot as the figure walks. That trait exists in great apes. It does not exist in humans. A human foot stays rigid through the midsection and doesn't bend at the center while moving. But in the film, the foot bends exactly where a human foot physically cannot. In 1967, the concept of the mid-tarsal break was barely mentioned in scientific discussion, and certainly wasn't common knowledge. Detailed research on midfoot flexibility and bipedal motion wouldn't appear until years after the footage was captured. Yet somehow, 2 rodeo cowboys from rural Washington included it, a precise anatomical feature that wouldn't gain serious academic attention for decades. No costume maker at that time would have known to fake something the science hadn't formally identified. Including a detail in a hoax that researchers hadn't yet described would either be an unbelievable coincidence in filmmaking history, or proof that the foot was bending because it was real. Next, the AI examined the environment. It reconstructed the terrain visible in the background and compared it to the documented geography of Bluff Creek, California. The alignment was exact. Every slope, every tree line, every contour of the land matched the real-world location. No set design or painted backdrop could replicate that degree of precision. The footage was recorded exactly where Patterson and Gimlin claimed it was. Even the lighting, shadow angles, and time of day calculations supported their timeline of the encounter. Then came the final assessment. The outcome delivered without emotion or bias. No signs of digital manipulation. No evidence of physical fabrication. The subject is physically present. The motion is authentic. The setting is genuine. But the figure does not fit any known biological classification. It is not human. It does not correspond to any documented primate species. After analyzing every measurable variable, the AI returned a result that satisfies no one. Real footage of an unidentified organism. It isn't confirmation. It isn't dismissal. It's something more unsettling. An answer that leads to an even deeper question. The encounter. October 20th, 1967. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding horseback through the rugged wilderness of Bluff Creek in Northern California. They weren't academics or professional filmmakers. They were outdoorsmen pursuing signs of a creature most people believed didn't exist. What they encountered wasn't just evidence. It was the being itself. Ahead of them, something enormous moved between the trees. It stood upright, steady and controlled, unlike any known animal. Close to 7 feet tall, its body was covered in dense brown hair that shifted with each heavy stride. It appeared to dip behind a fallen log, but its sheer size made true concealment impossible. Patterson's horse suddenly spooked and reared. He was thrown off balance but kept hold of his 16mm camera. After hitting the ground, he steadied himself and began filming. The recording would last 59 seconds. The figure, later called Patty, walked across a clearing with a calm, deliberate gait, showing no visible alarm at the 2 men watching. Later assessments suggested the subject was likely female, based on the structure of the chest and torso, features not consistent with any documented primate species. Then came the defining moment. The figure turned its head and looked directly toward the camera. Not a startled jerk, not a fleeting glance, a slow, intentional turn, as if acknowledging their presence before continuing on. That still image became known as frame 352, one of the most scrutinized frames in cryptozoological history. Beneath the fur, muscle movement is visible. No obvious seams, no fabric folds, no sign of a costume. Just a face looking back with what seemed like awareness. Gimlin wanted to pursue it into the forest. Patterson refused. He was unarmed and worried there might be others nearby. They remained where they stood, shaken, silently watching the tree line for further movement. When they later examined the area, they found a series of enormous footprints pressed deep into the soil. Each measured about 14 inches long, driven into the ground with a force suggesting several 100 pounds of weight. They poured plaster and made casts before weather could erase them. Those casts, along with frame 352, became the cornerstone of decades of debate. The prints displayed midfoot flexibility and a defined arch structure consistent with a primitive, non-human walking pattern, traits no ordinary human foot could replicate. 59 seconds of film, a single backward look, a line of tracks disappearing into a forest that swallowed the figure completely. That was the entirety of the evidence, and it was enough to spark argument for the next 60 years. The hoax that fell apart. In the early 2000s, writer Greg Long released The Making of Bigfoot, The Inside Story, arguing that the footage was a carefully staged hoax. His main source was Bob Heironimus, who claimed he had been paid $1,000 to wear an ape costume and portray Bigfoot for Patterson's camera. According to Heironimus, the suit came from costume supplier Philip Morris and was bulked up with sports padding to create a larger frame. He said he stayed silent for years because Patterson never paid him what he promised. When Morris later stepped forward to support parts of the story, their details immediately clashed. Morris stated he had sold a gorilla suit for $435, yet no receipt, invoice, or documentation of that sale has ever been found. He described the material as dynel, a synthetic fiber often used in marine applications. Heironimus, however, described something entirely different: synthetic fur combined with horsehide that reportedly smelled foul. Two individuals allegedly involved in the same hoax couldn't agree on the most basic detail: what the suit was made of. No photo of the costume has ever surfaced. No leftover material has ever been recovered. No independent witness has verified their version of events. The inconsistencies alone severely weakened the claims. Then came the attempts at recreation. Over the years, professional costume designers, special effects teams, and independent creators have tried to replicate the figure seen in the Patterson Gimlin film. Every effort fell short. Modern suits wrinkled at the joints. The fur moved unnaturally. The illusion broke down as soon as the performer began walking. Morris himself, the man who said he built the original, later attempted to recreate the costume. The result was widely criticized. The material sagged where it should have stretched. The folds around the limbs were obvious. The proportions were off. The movement lacked authenticity. It looked unmistakably like a suit. If Morris had truly created the original, he was unable to reproduce it. And no one else has succeeded either. The hoax narrative began to unravel under its own contradictions. And what follows is the part of this story many people have never heard. If you're still watching, subscribe now, because what comes next changes everything. The human toll. If the Patterson Gimlin film was staged, it stands as one of the worst business moves imaginable. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin never became wealthy from it. There were no major book contracts, no Hollywood deals, no licensing fortunes. What followed instead was decades of ridicule, damaged reputations, and lives overshadowed by controversy. From the moment the footage surfaced, Patterson faced constant scrutiny. Reporters, researchers, and television crews pressed him for answers. He agreed to a polygraph test and passed. He gave interview after interview, recounting the same sequence of events with consistent detail, never altering his version, never adding drama, never backing away. He held to that account for the rest of his life. When Patterson was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, he spent his final years fighting both the illness and the disbelief surrounding the film. Even as his health declined, he continued defending what he said he witnessed at Bluff Creek. He died in 1972, only 5 years after filming the footage, still maintaining it was genuine. He was 38. He left behind a wife, children, and a film many had already labeled a fraud. After Patterson's death, Gimlin carried the story alone. For more than 5 decades, he repeated the same account under every kind of scrutiny: television appearances, documentaries, skeptical panels, academic reviews, podcasts, and private confrontations. His narrative never shifted. Not one key detail changed, despite relentless questioning. He was called a liar, a hoaxer, even foolish. He gained no significant wealth, no meaningful fame. He simply continued telling the same story to audiences often unwilling to accept it. The strain went beyond public image. Gimlin retreated from the spotlight for years, exhausted by the ridicule that followed him. His relationship with Patterson's family became strained under the ongoing debate. Instead of validating their discovery, the film became a weight that followed them for life. Patterson's widow received no lasting financial reward, no royalties that changed her circumstances, only a legacy wrapped in controversy. Two men who might have been remembered as discoverers were instead treated as deceivers, and the scrutiny never truly ended. Consider the implications. If the footage were fabricated, these men chose decades of doubt, financial struggle, and public criticism rather than confess. Patterson carried the claim to his early death. Gimlin endured 50 years of questioning without contradicting himself. Neither recanted, neither profited, neither altered their account.
I remember the feeling. It was just, yes, they really do exist.
That's what hoaxers usually do. They cash in. They publish the story. They sit on talk shows and explain how the trick worked. They turn attention into profit. History shows that most major hoaxes end in confession, because maintaining a lie is draining, and the reveal often pays better than the deception. Patterson and Gimlin never followed that pattern. They endured backlash for what they said they witnessed, and the consequences never really faded. If it was fabricated, it would rank as one of the most controlled, expensive, and ultimately pointless lies ever maintained by two individuals. And that creates a problem the hoax theory has never fully resolved. If it wasn't real, why accept decades of damage instead of simply admitting it? The impossible conclusion. Every instrument modern science can deploy has now been turned toward 59 seconds of film captured in 1967. Artificial intelligence, biomechanical simulation, 3D motion tracking, digital forensic enhancement, high-resolution frame interpolation, machine learning, texture analysis, terrain correlation, proportion modeling, gait reconstruction. None of it has identified what crossed Bluff Creek. The figure in the Patterson Gimlin footage does not fit any known human anatomy. It does not align with any cataloged primate species. Its limb ratios, stride dynamics, muscular movement, and foot structure all sit outside the documented range of recognized organisms. The AI's conclusion was clear. Real subject, real setting, authentic motion. No detectable fabrication, and no available biological classification. Every recreation attempt has failed. Every hoax narrative has unraveled under contradiction. Every dismissal has avoided one central issue: explaining what is actually on the film. The footage has now outlived most of the people who tried to disprove it, and that leaves a possibility neither human nor artificial analysis has openly declared. If the being in that film was real, it did not appear for 59 seconds and then cease to exist. It entered the forest. It went somewhere. It continued living. A biological process capable of producing a 7-foot, 500-pound bipedal primate would not produce only one. Species do not exist alone. They reproduce. They migrate. They establish territory. They require food, water, shelter. If one walked through Bluff Creek in 1967, there were others. And if there were others, the question becomes whether there are others now. In the nearly 6 decades since that afternoon in Northern California, humanity has launched satellites that can read a license plate from orbit, thermal drones that detect body heat beneath dense canopy, millions of trail cameras across North American wilderness, AI systems that recognize faces in crowds of thousands. We have mapped the ocean floor, photographed Mars in high resolution, documented species in the deepest Pacific trenches, sequenced genomes of organisms extinct for millennia. None of it has found this. Whatever moved through Bluff Creek on October 20th, 1967, standing roughly 7 feet tall, weighing an estimated 500 pounds, leaving tracks deep enough for plaster casts, has not been conclusively documented again. It has not been captured. It has not been killed. It has not been classified. It has not been explained. It disappeared into wilderness vast enough to guard a secret for 60 years. More than 700,000 square miles of uninterrupted forest stretch across the Pacific Northwest alone. Terrain so dense and remote that entire watersheds remain unsurveyed on foot, valleys untouched in recorded history, canopy too thick for aerial penetration, soil soft enough to erase evidence within hours. If something intended to remain hidden there, it could, and it seems to have. The AI performed exactly as designed. It analyzed the footage with precision beyond human perception. It confirmed authentic motion, physical presence, real terrain. It ruled out known methods of fabrication, and then it reached its limit. Because the result it produced offers no comfortable category. Something was present, something tangible, something absent from every database, taxonomy, and biological record on Earth. The most unsettling fact is not that it was filmed. It is that whatever it was did not vanish after those 59 seconds. It walked away. It kept breathing, feeding, moving through a landscape we believed fully mapped. If it existed then, it may still exist now. After 60 years of searching with every tool humanity has created, we are no closer to certainty than two men on horseback who encountered something on a quiet afternoon in Northern California. The forest has not surrendered its secret. No satellite, no drone, no algorithm, no intelligence, artificial or human, has extracted it.